Welcome back to a numbers game with Ryan Gerdusky. Thank you guys for being here. I am so excited to tell my listeners that I have some new news, exciting new news. Starting January 1st, this podcast is going to go from 2 days a week to 3 days a week. It will be out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. I felt like I could only do this podcast correctly in the midterms if I had more access to you guys and more time to do it. So I'm really excited about that. I hope people all will like and subscribe and follow me on all the platforms, including YouTube, to really get all the breaking data coming into this midterm election. And I promise to give it to you guys as fresh as I can with new perspectives every single week with great new guests. So please like and subscribe and join me. I'm very, very excited about this. So I want to start off this podcast by giving my condolences to the people at Brown University who were murdered in the school shooting, and to the Jewish community in Australia, and speak specifically about that issue because the Brown shooting, they still haven't even caught a suspect. I don't even know if they have a suspect yet. But we know what happened in Australia. Two Islamists they went to a Hanukkah event that was on a beach, and they targeted Jews, and they shot into the crowd. They shot at the crowd, killing loads of people, scores of people. At least a dozen are dead. It keeps climbing. So I don't want to give you an accurate number or a total assessment because it's unfortunately likely to go into several dozens who will have been murdered, including a 10-year-old girl who lost her life. The gunmen used scopes in their guns, so it's very likely that they saw this little girl running and specifically targeted and shot her and murdered her. In the midst of this violence, one man at the event, an immigrant from Syria, worked to try to disarm one of the two gunmen. He was shot twice, and he was extremely brave and extremely heroic. But because Australia has such strict gun laws, he had no idea how to work the gun he had confiscated from one of the gunmen. So rather than shoot the terrorist, he let him get away. And that's not his fault. I'm not blaming him. I'm sure the rush of adrenaline in the second, who knows what anyone would have done, but the gunman ended up buying another firearm and going back to shoot into the crowd at the beach. There are a lot of lessons to take from this terrorist attack, as I think that there are with most terrorist attacks. None of them are being learned by people in the media who are focused on this. People like Piers Morgan. They're honoring the immigrant from Syria who did the right thing, who tried his best, who showed bravery in the moment, but they're not willing to learn any hard lessons. One, first being on policing. There were three police officers there when the shooting happened. They were all female police officers. I've heard rumors, I cannot confirm, that they were not even armed at the time. And according to live footage and to witness testimony, police officers just stood by as the gunmen were shooting. Now, I'm not saying that these women were hired because of DEI policies, but it's clearly that they should not have been police officers. I come from a cop family. I have a lot of police officers, my family generationally. My dad and his brothers were all cops. It's a tough job. And policing, unlike other civil service jobs, you never really know what you're going to face on a day-to-day moment. It could be a gunman, it could be a lost child, it could be terrorism, it could be a million things. It could just be a random mugger, it could be a mentally ill person. Being a police officer is a very, very difficult job, and most do the job well, but it's incredibly stressful, and it brings immense scrutiny. And if you can't do the job, whether it's because you're too trigger happy, or in this case, because you're too trigger shy, then you shouldn't be a police officer. These women should not be police officers. And police departments that mandate they hire girls for the sake of hiring girls are doing a disservice to every single person in their community, right? I mean, these women clearly could not stop these gunmen, even if they tried to tackle them, even if they couldn't shoot them because they didn't have arms, which I don't understand why in parts of the world, like in the UK, they don't have guns. Secondly, while the man who disarmed the terrorist briefly and he was immensely brave, he didn't shoot the terrorists in part because his family said he had never held a firearm before. He didn't know how a firearm worked. Now, there's no telling if he would have been, worked better if he had a gun, or if he or, he would have actually been trained if gun ownership was easier in Australia. But Australia has disarmed their citizens for decades, and this still happens. Stricter gun laws did not prevent this act of terrorism, and more gun laws, which is what Australia's leadership is proposing, won't. And lastly, and there's no getting around this, the West has a problem with Islamic terrorism And because of mass immigration, we're importing more people who are susceptible to become Islamic terrorists. If elected leaders of the West cared about their civilization, their liberal democracy, their Jewish population, women in their society, gays and minorities in their society, protecting Western philosophy, which maximizes personal and economic liberty, you cannot continue to import millions of people from the third world, especially those from cultures that are heavily influenced by Islamic ideology. We have seen this all over Europe for over a decade, and the elected leaders of the West's answer to this threat is to continue to import more people and hope that we don't notice things like the mass assault of German girls in New Year's Eve 2016, the Bataclan Theater mass murder and torture in Paris, the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of British girls across the UK who were groomed and gang raped by Pakistani men, and now the murders of dozens of Jews on the beaches in Australia. I'm not saying this case is the only example of anti-Semitism. We know that it exists in the Islamic population. We know that it's not exclusive to the Islamic population, right? It's a broad thing, but it's very real among these people. And when it came to the footage of who was celebrating the Bondi Beach massacre, the ones I saw from across the globe, the ones in the UK, they were all waving Palestinian flags. They were all wearing Palestinian scarves. No one seemed to have a history in the UK that were celebrating the Bondi Beach massacre going back to the 1066 Norman invasion. They were all recent immigrants. It is an existential emergency and has been this way for decades, for at least 2 decades. I'll give people the benefit of the doubt that maybe they missed this in the 90s when the populations were much smaller. By the 2010s and 2000s especially, by the 2010s, it's very clear what is happening across the West. It is an existential emergency. And if only leaders of the West clamp down immigration, if they only did that, they could probably end the entire national populist revolution that is sweeping across the world. They just won't do it. They can't do it. Mass immigration is so key to their globalist experiment. It is like oxygen to creating water. You can't have one without the other. They think that it's noble and wonderful to change your society into something that is unrecognizable, and that diversity at any cost is worth it and ethical. And it is proper to sit there and rub noses of diversity in front of people that don't like it. But they don't live among those people. Over the weekend, I was tweeting with Crystal Ball. I tweeted at Crystal Ball because she's a progressive commentator. She was on MSNBC. She's got a big YouTube show called Breaking Points. I've been on it many, many, many times, and I personally really like her. She's not, one-on-one. She's a very lovely person. But she was tweeting how the best thing about America is the cultural mixing, and feeling differently than that is un-American. Well, guess what the demographics of Crystal Ball's neighborhood in Virginia are? Take a wild guess about how diverse this neighborhood that she lives in is. Or Kentucky Representative Sarah Stalker, a Democrat who during a committee hearing last week said she felt guilty about being white and said we need DEI in schools to make white kids own their privilege. She backpedaled a little and said it's not about making them feel bad about their race, but we kind of know she let the cat out of the bag. It is about feeling bad about your race. It's not just about knowing their privilege through history. And she said how much pride she has that 145 languages were spoken in Jefferson County, Kentucky public schools. Do you think that Jefferson County, Kentucky public schools have the adequate budget, the adequate number of teachers to teach in 145 languages, even with all the technology that's easily available for them? Stalker, the representative, well, of course, she lives in an area called St. Matthews in Louisville, which is 90% Caucasian. She doesn't live in a diverse area. And then, of course, there was Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, who I mentioned at the beginning, he was on a Tucker Carlson's podcast or vice versa. One of them were on each other's podcast. Maybe Tucker was on his podcast. And he said that it was great that the UK will no longer be majority English by middle of the century because the food is better now than it was 30 years ago. And we should celebrate that diversity. And he said that we should celebrate the hero in Australia. We shouldn't talk about the fact that immigration brought terrorism to Australia. Just talk about the good immigrant, not the bad ones. That they are random, that it's randomly happening. Such a few people massively raping British girls. There's just a few people committing acts of terrorism or plotting acts of terrorism. It doesn't matter the fact that there have been 4 Afghani nationals and 5 Palestinian nationals in America in the last year who either successfully or unsuccessfully plotted terrorist attacks in this country. They're outliers. So therefore, ignore the bigger problem of immigration from Islamic countries. Guess the demographics of Piers Morgan's kids' schools. Guess how lily white the schools he sends his kids to are. It's called Thomas London Day School, and it's where Prince William sends his kids. There couldn't possibly be a whiter place on this planet. No, all of these people that push and love diversity, they want you to embrace diversity at any cost because it's not their daughters who will be groomed or gang raped in Northern England or die on a beach in Australia at a massacre or assaulted throughout the streets of Berlin. No, they will live in America or Australia or Germany or Britain in the 1950s in their own little enclaves. They'll get to go to the best diversity cuisines because that's apparently all that matters is that there's diverse food. We can't just import a chef. We have to import an entire village. It's the poor people. It's the working class who will never live in that level of comfort, live with all the chaos that comes with declining social capital because of mass population increases of immigration. All the people who spent their lives, and it's not their whole lives, but maybe the last 10 plus years, hating Brexit, hating Trump, hating Farage, hating Le Pen, all of those people who have made their whole lives focus around hating those people, hating the national populist revolution, they're responsible. They caused it because rubbing everyone else's noses in diversity made people rebel against their whole experiment, all while they choose to live as far away from it as humanly possible. And say what you want about Israel, which is pseudo non grata in a lot of circles, even on the right. Say what you want, but the fact is that they're nationalistic. They sit there and they know the time of day. They value their national identity and they're willing to do anything to preserve it. And there's a lot to learn with that. That's all. And I truly am feeling heartbroken for all the families who are going into both Hanukkah and Christmas burying somebody. It is senseless. It is reckless. And I hope that somebody can possibly wake up and do something. Next up, I have some polling to show you really how America feels going at the end of 2025, going into the new year on politics, on the economy. That's coming up next. Okay. All right. NBC News Decision Desk released a massive poll on Sunday discussing Americans' feelings on Trump, the economy, which party was the best on the cost of living, a lot of different questions. And this poll was powered by SurveyMonkey. That is an internet poll. I normally don't bring up internet polls that are exclusively internet because I don't really trust them. But NBC is the one that sponsored this poll, so they're covering it. So because NBC is covering it, it's kind of making its way through the ether. You're going to hear about it either in traditional media or on social media. So it's worth covering and really breaking down what this poll says. Now, this is different than a lot of other polls that ask registered voters or likely voters. This is asking all adults. 41% of respondents of the 20,252 respondents did not vote in the last election, right? They did not vote. 26% are not even registered to vote. So this is a broad section of people who I don't want to call ill-informed. That's not correct, but they are low engagement. That's the way to say it. They're low engagement on facts, on news, on information. So first question up, they sit there and they say, what are you most interested in? Interestingly enough, politics is a declining interest to most Americans. It went from 25% of the public saying it was what they're most interested in to 21%. I think that's actually kind of healthy. Personal finance and money and health and wellness have increased. Health and wellness has increased the most. It's probably a good thing than a bad thing. Biggest issue facing our country is obviously the economy. Economy comes in well ahead of everything else at 27%. That basically stagnant the entire year NBC is doing this poll. Second is threats to democracy. That's declined a little bit. Threats to democracy are both people who are like at the No Kings rally and people who are at QAnon stuff. It's two different side of the same crazy coin. And then lastly is healthcare. Healthcare has been pretty consistent for a while now. Lower level is crime and safety. That's at 12%. And then immigration is number 5. So 54%, this is what I find very interesting. 54% agree with this statement when asked. When it comes to politics and society, nothing really matters because powerful people will always do whatever they want. I'm sure this has been this way for a very long time, but this shows true levels of declining social trust that the elite, that the wealthy, that the politicians can be held accountable, which is why the mishandling of the Jeffrey Epstein story was so detrimental because it was such a closed case of this is a very bad person. But so far, aside from Prince Andrew, who was really held responsible, he's lost basically everything. Although he didn't go to jail, but he's lost all of his titles. No one else had any accountability. Only 25% of people disagree with that, by the way. So also, very, very interesting part of the poll is when they said, "How has 2025 been for you and your family?" A majority of people say 2025 has actually been a pretty good year. 59 to 41. 2025, they say 2025 has been a good year. They ask, "How do you think going to 2026, how it will be for you and your family?" 70% say it'll be better. People are genuinely optimistic, which is interesting given the news narrative. Now, when they ask people what economic issues are most important to them, number one, by far, is the rising cost of living, 44%. Number two is healthcare, all the way at 13%. When they ask people about that, how their personal finances have changed better or worse, interestingly, 31% of people who make more than $100,000 a year say it has been better. 44% say it's the same. Plurality of every group, except for people with household incomes under 50%, say it is the same. 39% say it's the same. 45% say it's worse for people making under $50,000 a year. And when they ask people, what are you doing to change? What personal decisions have you changed because of the rising cost of living? 65% of households making less than 50 grand a year say they've changed what groceries they buy to stay within budget. And 64% that said they cut back on extra entertainment. Cutting back extra entertainment has been the number one across all groups, but it goes from 64% among people who make less than $50,000 a year to 57% for people who make between 50 and 100, and then 43% by people who make over $100,000 a year. That's very, very interesting because there seems to be a clear break line around 50 grand of how severe the inflation is. People making over 50 grand or households making over 50 grand doesn't seem to be as intense. What they're talking about as far as things go, as far as cost of living goes, and what they're doing to change the cost of living is dramatically different, right? Cutting groceries is 53% for people making between 50 and 100 versus 65%. That's a big drop. And when you go over 100 grand, it's down to just 39%. So I found that very fascinating. Next up, when they sit there and say, "What is your biggest economic problem facing your family?" Cost of housing is one, cost of food is two, cost of insurance, health insurance is three. That is the entire ball game for the Republicans in 2026. Those three things: housing, healthcare, food. And obviously, they only have so much to control on those things. Rents are going down for 4 straight months. Housing costs seem to be stagnant, which is good. Food is still very expensive in certain things, and health insurance is still a disaster. It's been a disaster since Obamacare. But speaking of Obamacare, they ask voters, would you rather they repeal and replace Obamacare, keep it, or unsure? 46% say keep it, 24% say repeal it, 30% are unsure. So why, if healthcare is failing, do people want to keep it as is? Because people do not like uncertainty. And Obamacare was remarkably unpopular until the minute it was attempted to be repealed. Not because it's working great. It's not working great. Everyone sits there and says it's not working great. Why are they afraid of repealing it? Because they're afraid of being uncertain and not having health insurance if something happens. That's really where it is. So any kind of transformation when it comes to the health insurance market has to work within consistent framework so people don't feel like there's going to be a moment that they don't have anything to grab onto. They're worried tremendously about that. Which party do you trust more to handle healthcare? This is devastating for Republicans. 57% Democrats, 43% Republicans. Who do you trust to sit there and handle the rising prices of everyday things? 53% Democrats, 47% Republicans. I mean, Republicans should not be losing on the economy. Maybe because the tax cuts are coming next year and hopefully prices are reduced, this may be okay in the end. Like this may stabilize in the end. It's not that far off Republican Democrat, but it really has to be emphasized that that's that things are getting better. The problem for Republicans is that the media has done a very good job about branding Trump's tariffs. Tariffs are super, super unpopular. People believe that they are responsible for the rising cost of everything when in fact when they've looked at this time and time again, consumers have not bared the brunt of rising costs. There's a lot of things that are making those costs rise. It's not just tariffs. Tariffs are helping a little effect, but things like health insurance or auto insurance or home insurance, these things have nothing at all to do with tariffs. How much will you spend on Christmas this year? 55% say less than last year, 9% say more. This is a really bad sign. People are optimistic with the future, but they have been through it this last year and they thought that it was going to get better. Question 23. I'm reading these as they go along. Question 23. How would you feel if the stock market crashed by 30%? What a stupid question. These people charge by question. So imagine wasting one of your questions. How would you feel if the stock market crashed? Oh, I feel wonderful. Do you support or oppose the building of the ballroom? Once again, a thing that doesn't affect anybody's life. 33% support, 67% oppose. No one cares. Like this is not what anyone's going to go vote. The handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files with the Trump administration, 71% disapprove, 29% approve. This is not a question for me because I don't watch sports and nor do I gamble on them, but I think it's a fascinating question. We've talked about this during the podcast over the last year. Do you think that sports betting is lessening the integrity of the game? 70% say yes, 30% say no. How concerned are you that the increasing availability of sports betting will lead to the game becoming rigged? 63% say yes, 38% say no. Okay, that's basically the poll. They're going to make a big deal of they asked, are you more of a MAGA supporter or a Republican? It was 50-50. Are you more of a progressive or a centrist Democrat? 50-50. When you're dealing with such an undecided population, so many people who have never voted as this poll is, you're going to get numbers like that. It doesn't really mean anything. I think the biggest thing that you could take from this poll, which the media probably isn't covering that extensively, is people are optimistic about the future, but where they're seeing their day-to-day lives increase, food, insurance, housing is where they're going to go vote on those three issues. Anything existential outside of that is not going to mean as much. Those are the three things that if you're a Republican consultant, even figuring like I am, but if you're a consultant for campaigns, you have to spend your days thinking, how will I address these three issues? How will I talk about these three policies or how do I think about policies that will make these three things better and correctly address what's affecting their rises, what's affecting their cost increases, and how best a politician can answer them. All right, coming up next is Ask Me Anything. Stay tuned. Now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email me Ryan at numbersgamepodcast.com. That's Ryan at numbersgamepodcast.com. I will either answer them personally if they're just, a one-on-one thing like I did actually two of them today, or if it's a question that the whole audience will like, I will talk about it publicly on the air. So this one comes from Patty from Sacramento. She said, I really enjoyed your interview with Representative Ro Khanna. I'm in California, not in his district, but interested in what he says. I caught some disconnect in his ideas and plans to move forward regarding immigration and AI that concern me. I like that he's actually interested in you and your opinions. Patty, thank you. And that's why I tried, whenever I have a guest, especially, I know who I am, right? I know Democrats don't want to talk to me. I was the guy who made the beeper joke. I get it, right? So I always want to make people, when they come on the podcast, feel comfortable, have a conversation. I'm not here to own you. I'm not here to sit there and yell at you. I'm not going to try to make a viral moment for myself because it doesn't make the audience more interested or smarter, right? Yeah. That's just clicks. That's what everyone does. I'm not interested in that. I want to have a real conversation over ideas because there's things that a Democrat or a Republican could say that you could disagree with or that you could agree with, and we can all become more intelligent for hearing each other out. I loved Representative Connor for coming that, but he did not make any sense when he said that because he's saying AI is taking our jobs, and at the same time, he's talking about fears that we're not going to be so pro-immigrant to bring in the whole world. That's why I said to him, I was like, "You're going to run out of tax." He wanted to do this AI New Deal where everyone was getting checks from all these companies, and I was like, "You're gonna run out of tax dollars if you're bringing in the whole world." And he didn't have an answer for it. And I think that maybe I hope it made him think. I really do. I don't know if it did. Anyway, Patty, you say your niece teaches in LA and the kids don't speak English or Spanish at the home, and it's very, very difficult. This type of mass immigration is changing the fabric of our state and our country, and not in a good way. I believe if we do not take care and educate our citizens in our own country, we will fail. We cannot help any other parts of the world if we are a failure. Patty, I could not agree more with that. And yeah, and I have in-laws, and relatives over in different parts of the country in small town red America, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we have kids in ESL." Their teachers are like, "We have kids in ESL. They don't speak Spanish or English, and we don't know how to communicate with them. We're using apps and stuff like that." And, I'm like, "Is that helping?" And they're like, "Well, kind of," and they're making, like, shadow puppets. Who the hell knows? They're trying to communicate with people any which way possible, but if you are not literate in your own language, the chances of you picking up a second one from just a few hours of school a day, not high likely. Okay, second and last question for this episode. It comes from Joel. Joel, thank you for writing me again. He says he's keeping an eye on the UK politics, especially the Guardians Today in Focus podcast. I've not listened to that podcast, but maybe I should check it out. He says, have you seen the reports alleging Nigel Farage bullied and tormented Jewish classmates in high school? I have. I know that they're making a big deal of this. I kind of doubt it. I mean, the man is like 65 years old. So, I mean, you're telling me 50 years ago that they've been holding on to this anger that he made fun of a Jewish classmate 50 years ago. I mean, unless he, like, beat them to a pulp, I would say probably get over someone saying something mean about you, especially considering he's been probably the most pro-Israel person, pro-Jewish person running for office in that country. What do you think this means for Reform UK's trajectory, especially if Farage continues to lead it? Can a populist party absorb something like this and survive? So I think that, listen, the way it kind of works with a lot of these populist parties is they kind of worry about peaking too early. And I think that's more of Farage's worry that he's peaking too early. Labor's putting out a lot of good press stuff saying, look how much we're reducing immigration, we're reducing immigration, we're reducing immigration. That may not be enough to sit there and save Keir Starmer as prime minister, but it could lessen the blow, especially as progressive voters, they're not Labor voters rather, they're not looking to maybe Farage in many places, but they're looking to the Green Party or the Lib Dem. So Farage, Reform UK is definitely still leading the polls. Farage's biggest worry is that he has to get very serious about leading this party to victory, a national victory, which he's never done before. A national victory that's not for the EU Parliament, but for the Parliament in London, and not be a victim of his own success. And their numbers have gone down a little bit, but they're still large and in charge. Second, there's a new leftist faction called Your Party coalescing around former labor figures like Jeremy Corbyn. It looks like a socialist alternative to labor, emphasizing trans everything, housing, redistribution, anti-war, and protest rights. Do you think they'll pull votes from labor? That is simply yes. That's an easy answer. And finally, have you followed Zach Polanski's rise as leader of the Green Party? He seems like he's pulling towards a kind of left-wing eco-populism similar to the young progressive circles in the U.S. Curious if you think this style of politics could gain traction here too. It already has. I mean, the Green New Deal was everyone gravitated towards it. But I I think that part of what left-wing populism in this country is is a lot of it is racial identity just because of how the left views everything, even more so than the environment. If you guys watched Jasmine Crockett announce her run for the US Senate in Texas, it was a bit of a disaster. Her ad was weird. And her video or her opening speech rather was strange where she kind of said that we need illegal immigration because black people stop picking cotton. Okay, Jasmine. I don't think that that's really what Hispanics want to be compared to. I know a few Hispanics who live in South Texas. They're usually very proud people. They're been here for generations. A lot of the Tejanos always say, like the border moved, we didn't. They've been here longer than a lot of other people have. They don't really view themselves as slaves, and it's interesting that she does, and it's interesting the way she talks about illegal labor. Very, very, very curious. I don't know if she's gonna win. She might win the primary, but My guess is she's probably going to burn down the flame. She also says she doesn't want the support of anyone who voted for Donald Trump in Texas. So that'll go very, very well because it's not like he won the state by 15 points or anything like that. It's going to go extremely good. She's so smart. All right, guys, that is my episode for today. Thank you guys for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Like and subscribe on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get this podcast. And I will see you guys on Thursday.